Welcome to the Debunking Economics podcast with Professor Steve Keen. I'm Phil Dobbie, and today, is competition a benefit or a hindrance? We're told competition is key to the functioning of an efficient economy because nobody gets away with behaviour that would be detrimental to the greater good. But what if the greater good is being missed out on because companies are too busy competing on things like price rather than working together on innovative solutions that they'll never be able to reach on their own? What if competition actually gets in the way of advancing society? That's today on the Debunking Economics podcast. Now, Eve Poole, in her book Capitalism's Toxic Assumption, suggests competition is more destructive than positive. In truth, success and growth comes from collaboration, she says, and our reliance on competition has historically been driven by too much testosterone. But how can you develop a system where cooperation is effectively rewarded? So, Steve, first of all, this is a book, and this is an economics book, which I have read, and you haven't. I didn't know such a book existed, but it's a good it's a good book. So, and now I've told you this, you've been on Amazon and you've ordered the bloody thing, so that's good. I
have. So I'll see if I can read it while I'm flying back to Australia at Christmas time or something like that.
Now, look, let's start with an example of competition gone wrong. Because I know you think a good model of competition, because we've spoken about this in the past, is a situation where you've got one dominant player in the market, but you've got lots of almost, smaller companies, mid-sized companies who are competing, and they're the ones that are adding innovation. So that innovation is challenging the big company, so it can't get too big for its boots. But, sometimes strength can be destructive, can't it? So let's, I want to give you an example on this, on an area I know and understand. I mean, just imagine there's a big Australian phone company. I mean, we won't, let's not name names. Let's create a fictional name. So we'll call it Ostra. And they build a new mobile base station in a small country town. And everybody in that town now has access to a mobile phone, which they didn't before, but they've got to buy it from Ostra. And nobody else is going to want to build there, because if they build a mobile phone tower, it's going to cost too much and they're going to divide the market, and it's not going to justify the expense of building another tower. So in theory, Ostra would say, well, it's competition. You're welcome to, but we're using our market power to extend our network as far as possible, and we are claiming 100% market share. That's not really competition, though, is it?
Yeah, that's the reality. This is the unfortunate thing, that we have this vision that the neoclassical theory has an effective vision of costless entry and exit from markets. So you can simply decide to go into a market and pull out again later. And of course, that simply is totally fictional, because if you're going to compete with Ostra in that country town, let's call it Galagamban, then you need to put a second tower in presence. And having put that second tower in, you've got a sunk cost you can't get back again. And you divide the market in two, so you go from one profitable company to two failing companies. One then pulls out again later, and you have a huge amount of waste generated out of that to no positive benefit.
And the competition regulator is never going to say anything about that, because they're going to say, well, look, if we said something, Ostra wouldn't have built in that town and we'd all be worse off. But of course, if you look at collaboration, I mean, if Ostra would allow other providers to use their tower, then you would have competition. Or if Ostra and all the other providers said, well, actually, there's a whole load of areas which we can't get to because it's just not, it's too expensive for us to do it. But let's all, collaborate. You'd extend the footprint of the mobile network, and everyone would win.
That's right. So you need a mixture of both competition and cooperation, and this is what mainstream economics is incapable of capturing properly, because it makes simplifying assumptions like there can be costless entry and exit from a market. So what's your problem? I'm sorry, my problem is outside your assumptions. So that's the real dilemma. So again, the ideal situation in a telecommunications example would be to have either a nationally owned, a government-owned institution that provides the physical backbone, or you tell the companies Yeah, you could tell the companies they've got to form a consortium that lays out the hardware, and then they can compete over the software.
And there is so much more to this conversation, but you're not going to hear it now. To hear the whole interview, you'll need to subscribe at debunkingeconomics.com or become a supporter of Steve on Patreon. Go to patreon.com/Prof Steve Keen. If you offer $10 or more per month as a supporter, then you'll get access to this and all the other podcasts in this series. So come back and join us soon. I'm Phil Dobbie. Thanks for listening.